Brands Hatch brings a new champion as Hill hits the heights and becomes a brand new champion. This is the Brands Hatch Grand Prix review.
Hello and welcome back to the British Touring Car Podcast. We are back for the final race weekend of the year and bringing you up to date with all the action from Brands Hatch. Now, slightly different format to last week. We are watching the races live, doing our little mini reports after each race. So you'll see lights change and developments throughout the day as we.
I wear a jumper at one point, which is for people who watch on the YouTube. That would be exciting for you.
Yes. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Obviously, we record this bit last, which means that our third special panel member isn't here, which is a shame. He's gone home. But video or watchers, you can keep an eye out for him joining us for the panel for races 1 and 2. It's been a really good season. Obviously, we're going to get into the weekend's action in a moment. Jake Hill, worthy champion. But let's see how it all began on Saturday.
Yeah. Straight into qualifying then, again, the Super 6 format, which I must say, as a review of that first of all, across the season, I think it has worked wonderfully.
Yeah, I'd like to see a few tweaks for next year. I'd like maybe to see the second session have to run a medium tyre maybe, just to add in something a little bit different. Yeah. But look, qualifying before was basically an hour of cars going in a circle, which it was really dull. It was a glorified test session. Yeah. And there was no jeopardy. You mess up a lap, as long as you didn't cause a red flag, go in, get it all changed. It's fine. We've got
another load of tyres.
Another half hour to chuck at this yet. We'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah, exactly.
This format is brilliant, and I really do like it. And I almost think actually the poll should maybe have a few more points than one,
possibly
because of the nature of the pressure around it. But anyway, we'll talk about that in the off season.
Points for leading each session.
Maybe I think they could. I think they could change it up, but we'll talk about that in the off season. I think you're right. As a quick overview soundbite, yes, this format has been excellent this season, and credit Toka, because bringing in any change is often met with stern faces and anger, and we like the old ways. But actually, this has been a really, really fresh way of brightening up the championship and making it a bit more unpredictable. Yeah,
I'm glad to have seen it at every round this year. Obviously, we've had the trial in the last season or two, but I think it's worked really well. So straight into it then. Qualifying 1A and B, I'll get it out of the way together. There weren't really major casualties. Rob Huff, probably the most notable of that, especially where he was in the championship. But him, Chilton, Zelos, Watson all struggled a little bit for completely dry session.
Yeah, and obviously you've mentioned 2 BSM cars there struggling, which would be a bit of a tone for the weekend, as we'll get into.
Yeah, 3 of the 4 went out in the Q1 sessions. I must say though, the first Q1 session was tough.
Yeah.
There were some high quality drivers in there, and it was difficult to pick out that last driver who was going to miss out. So yeah, it'd be interesting if we get more sessions like that next year.
Absolutely.
Moving into Q2 then, probably the star of this session, Daryl De Leon got in there and finished 8th.
Yeah, he was really quick most of the weekend.
He looked really good this weekend.
And obviously running the biofuel, which is the only car on the grid to be doing so. A look into the future about how we might run in cars further down the line.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that there doesn't seem to be any necessary performance deficit. Obviously, he ran it last time out at Silverstone where I thought he looked a little bit slow.
Yes, me too.
But running it here, he looks like he's being able to keep up with the pace of everyone else. So I just wonder how it's going to affect the internals of the engine, whether it's a longevity thing or whether it's something that they're looking to be completely happy with and moving towards that sustainability, which we want to see in motorsport anyway. Mikey Doble was the unlucky driver just to miss out in 7th, but also Dan Camish and Aidan Moffat got through to this session.
He did.
Dan Camish was out in 10th. Moving into the Super 6 then, and it was those main championship contenders that were up there and vying for it all basically. Sutton, Ingram, Cook, Hill and Turkington, along with Taylor Smith, would be competing in this session altogether. There were a few laps that were disallowed, shall we say.
Yeah, Sutton did
track limits.
Sutton did an absolutely mega lap, which would have put him pole by some margin. But he would blame Aaron Taylor Smith for being in the way, and therefore he had to run wide, and thus he compromised his lap by triggering the track limits, thus having that lap time taken away. And he cooked the tyres. He'd gone for the high.
It was that one and only lap.
He'd gone for the high risk approach, hadn't he? Where basically I think he'd only bolted a new set of softs on the front, left the ones from the previous session on the rear, and had he stayed out. He didn't come in across the tyres. He stayed out and basically was going to go for that one do or die lap, and came very close to doing. But
it was almost a perfect lap. He had
Yeah.
4 purple sectors at that point in the session, and as you say, it would have been more than easy enough to take pole position. But however, his second fastest lap would only put him third on the grid, a 129.46, whereas Ingram and Turkington will both go faster on a 129.3, with Turkington taking pole position. Jake Hill would finish in 6th in this session, and so would be slightly on the back foot going into race 1.
with Turkington taking pole, it means that he did win the illustrious Wingfoot Award. It wasn't a foam foot this year. It was actually quite a slick trophy.
Quite shiny, wasn't
very
it?
shiny. It was very nice on his mantelpiece, I'm sure. But yeah, Turkington has obviously been the best qualifier this season. He'd be slightly disappointed, therefore, he's not in the championship contention.
It's something ridiculous, like he's had an average qualifying position of 4th.
Yeah, which is really good.
Which is really good, really consistent. I think this format kind of suits him as well.
Absolutely.
Because he is that driver of consistency. And being rear-wheel drive, they're able to attack pretty much from lap 2 onwards.
Yeah, I don't really know how to level that off. We'll think of a way in the off-season and come back to that. But yeah, it meant that Colin, as you say, would be starting on pole in race 1. But Tom Ingram would be alongside him and trying to get into the lead to push his championship hopes forward. Let's get into how it unfolded. Race 1 then, and for audio or visual viewers rather, we have got a special guest on the panel who might poke his head up at some point. We're going to get the views of Teddy on the first lap incident, but we'll get there in good time. In terms of the front drivers, Ash, Tom, Jake and Colin all started on the soft tyre, so no disparity there. The highest starting medium car was Aaron Taylor-Smith, perhaps looking at the longer term of the day, get that medium tyre out the way, have 2 softs and maybe eye up that race 3 win, or even potentially a race 2 win, because as we'll get to, he starts quite high.
He does, yeah. I quite like that strategy. When you know that there's only going to be a handful of drivers going on that soft tyre, you want to be that highest finisher on the medium, so then it gives you the best outlook for the rest of the weekend. So I can completely understand why he's done that.
And of course, he has got more hybrid in the cars in front of him as well, so he could potentially use that to his advantage to keep the pace throughout the race. So yeah, an interesting bit of strategy. I suppose when you are in that enviable position really in some ways around Taylor Swift, you already won the independents, you already won the independents teams, so now you can actually have the whole day focus around trying to get that race win.
And him and Dobble starting next to each other on the grid, they've split the strategy there as well. One on the soft, Dobble knows he's already got the jack sears wound up. It's a glorified testing weekend for them really, and come out of it with the best result that they possibly can.
Yeah, it's a bit of a free hit. Absolutely. So cool race conditions, which was slightly potentially nervous times for the BMW garage, although not for Turkington. A great start by him, as you'd expect, off the front. Did really well. Ingram seemed to bog down a little bit, trying to come across to block Sutton, which ultimately didn't work.
Ingram said on the grid that probably the best place was to start in this race was probably 5th if you're going to be on the outside, because it pokes slightly downhill. You still got that little uphill run from second, and he didn't quite make the most of it.
No, Sutton was able to get down the inside into Paddock Hill Bend and sort of take himself into second position. We should also mention at this point that Ingram's start is under investigation alongside Darryl de Leon's. What I will say is I think he'll be okay, famous last words, but on the replays, he's definitely in his pit box. And I can't see any movement before the lights. Now,
I can't see any movement.
Imagine the reason it's been done after the race is because I'll go and check the data against the timings on the lights to see if there's any sort of discrepancy. But I think he'll be okay.
The other thing I also noticed was probably out of the top 10 drivers, him and De Leon had the worst start.
And Taylor Smith, who almost stalled it, and drove into the grass. You did say
he got quite a lot of wheel spin.
Before going into the race started on our fair, he said, I wonder how quickly he lets Dobble through. I wasn't expecting him to necessarily do it off the line.
Before Paddock Hill Bend, Yeah,
absolutely. And then, of course, we get into the big talking point of race 1. And unfortunate, really. So Cook, Sutton and Ingram were basically 3 wide going into Druids. Sutton seemed to brake quite early, not quite sure why, which meant Ingram had to brake as well. And Cook, it looked like he missed his braking point completely, mixed with something potentially braking on the car, because his car would absolutely, as soon as he put the brakes on, his car snapped at the rear and went across Sutton and Ingram. Yeah,
I'm not sure whether he necessarily missed the braking point or whether he was just caught out by how early the other 2 were braking. or as you say, whether something's let go. We heard an interview from him during the race to say he possibly had a tyre off or something. That early in a race would surprise me.
Well, this has not been fitted properly, which can happen.
Possible. But yeah, it really started a consequence of events, didn't it?
Yeah, so Sutton was the big loser. He got turned around completely, had the front end broken and was stuck in the gravel. It took him a long time to get out the car as well, which is a little bit concerning. Now, I don't know, as you said, maybe that's just emotion of any chance I have had has gone now.
Yeah.
But we didn't get a pit lane interview with him either. And again, that's probably maybe Louise just deciding it's not best to stick in a microphone under his mouth at that point. But look, it's bad luck for Sutton. He's obviously now out of the championship contention. In truth, it was always going to be a long shot.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, that is...
Despite your message to me yesterday going, I've got a sneaky suspicion he might do this.
The thing was...
Completely taken out on that one.
The thing was, had he not been taken out, I know there's some buts and all that kind of stuff, but he was quick.
Yeah.
He was clearly quick and clearly had the bit between his teeth. I don't think there's anybody's fault, per se. Cooks, in his interview, said he hit him and Tom Rubb down Paddock Hill Bend. I didn't see it on the replay, personally. I just think that it's a classic case of the 3-1 doesn't go with dramatic consequences.
Yeah.
Ingram was actually quite, it's going to sound counterintuitive because he got shuffled down from where he was on the grid to 9th. However, he was quite fortunate because Sutton sort of went across his car nicely without damaging any of the front end.
It was lucky that they didn't like almost get locked together and go into
which
the
we've seen at Druids before.
Yeah, exactly. He was able to stop the car before it got to that point and then weave his way round the other accident that was then happening as a consequence of Cook spinning.
And again, he was quite fortunate in that, the fact that Cook spun all the way around, Morgan crashed into him, so everybody else behind him basically stopped to try and get through this nice little gap that had emerged. So basically, Ingram lost very little in comparison to what he could have lost.
Yeah, he could have been right at the back.
Absolutely. He did get past Rowbottom, but that was potentially just them being cautious. Some debate whether he'd done that pass before or after the safety car boards are out. Played edge on the side of caution and gave Rowbottom back the place on the safety car. The right thing to do, particularly in these circumstances. However, in the safety car queue, I did say to you that he would recover to at least 4th, if not 3rd. All the cars in front of him, apart from Turkington, DeLyon, Dobble and Hill, were on mediums, so you'd immediately imagine him to get past them. And then, with all due respect to DeLeon and Dobble, I'd expect Ingram to get past them anyway, particularly with how good that Hyundai is. That Sutton incident pretty much sums up his season for me. It's just been a season of bad luck, because every time he sort of got into a position where he might be looking at maybe making a bit of progress, you think of Alton Park, you think of Silverstone.
A few too many non-scores and a couple of incidents that he's got caught up in. It's kind of summed up the season. The car hasn't had the pace to recover like it did last year if he got into a little bit of difficulty. And I think, in all honesty, 3rd is a good result for him this season, as long as he stays there in the championship come the end of the day.
Absolutely. So when the safety car picked the group up, it was Turkington in the lead. He had managed to get himself to 2nd. He had avoided all the trouble, which fair play.
Stuck through on the inside.
Yep, which is what he needs to do. And obviously, we would expect Turkington to move out of the way as soon as feasibly possible after the restart. And that did indeed happen. Lap 7, Hill through, but couldn't get away from Turkington.
No, he couldn't. And just before getting onto that, a couple of the other drivers that were caught up in there were Morgan, Huff, and obviously we know Cook.
And Rowbottom.
And Rowbottom had some damage. Something also came into the pits just right at the end of the safety car period, which was a weird one for me.
I wonder if he's picked up some debris and maybe had a puncture, because he came back out, which would suggest to me that it potentially was a puncture.
Quite a few retirements early on. The Hill being let past, we kind of knew it was going to come. But to see Turkington put on the indicator and let him pass was just make it look a little more organic.
I know it doesn't look great. I know that some people may have a problem with it, but equally, team orders have existed in motorsport. We bemoaned Napa last week for not using them at Silverstone. For me, I've got no problem if it's a teammate doing it. If another competitor and another team, which we've seen in other, and I hope we don't see that for the rest of the day, we've seen in other years, that really winds me up. Actually, as we're going to get to Ingram now, coming back through the field, a few of his passes wound me up a little bit, particularly the Camish one.
It's safe to say not a great deal of defending was done apart from when he got to Turkington.
Yeah, Dobble gave him a good fight, and Dobble gave him room. The move on Dobble was a good move. He saw the slide from Dobble out of Graham Hill and lunged ready for the turn on as you go onto the back part of the circuit.
Yep.
It was quite a late lunge by Ingram, and Dobble gave him racing room. That I've got no problem with. I don't think Dobble moved out the way on that one.
No.
I just think that he caught Dobble out a little bit. But the Camish one sticks in my throat a little bit. And I know that Sutton now can't win the championship because he's in the gravel, and Camish will know this. But he does. I know the tyre offset doesn't help either, but Camish basically just pulled out the way and let him through on the inside. It was bizarre. I'm not sure.
It did look more organic than the Turkington Hill one.
Yeah, it did.
But he certainly... Ingram's pace after that, we wondered whether there would be any little bit damage to the car from the coming together, but his pace was astonishing at times. He was half a second, 0.6 quicker a lap, which really helped him get through the field.
And in fairness to Camish, just give it the other way. I mean, you're right there. The team will know that he's quick. The team will know that he's fired up, and we see it in Formula 1 as well. It's a difficult balance. Is there any point fighting a fight that's not your fight?
Camish was on the mediums as well.
Yeah, and it's not going to affect the manufacturers either.
Nope.
It's a tricky one. Personally, I like to see every position fought hard for, but I can understand it as well. And you're right, that car was so good. Something I picked up during the race quite a lot is just how good it is on turning. The change of direction on that Hyundai is just magnificent. I mean, you saw a couple of times he tried the cutback and how quickly he could get the cutback. It's astonishing.
Yeah,
it's like a go-kart almost.
I know
how quickly it changes direction.
Considering how big the car looks, you'd think the Toyota and possibly even the Ford would be a lot better at that, and even the Astra. But yeah, he's able to drive it in the exact way that he wants to drive that car.
One question I brought up during the race, and this is again a difficult one to answer because we're not racers, but when he caught the leading three, Dobble was just starting to put the pressure on Turkington.
Yeah.
Would Ingram have been better to maybe just give a lap or two to see what Dobble could do? And I'm not saying Dobble would have taken Turkington off, but what I'm saying is that let them race for a lap or two, see what happens. You've got no one behind you, you've got that luxury, you've got the space. Whereas actually Ingram went straight for Dobble, which then allowed Turkington to escape a little bit because, okay, he only lost maybe a lap racing Dobble and he was back on the back of Turkington anyway. And it's really counterintuitive to say to a racer, back off, just see what Dobble can do here.
It is.
But what do you think?
Knowing how defensive Turkington can drive, I think although Dobble isn't classed as a threat in this position, I think he wants to keep that as I'm the one directly behind Hill, so nothing can then happen. We saw that Hill was struggling a little bit for pace in this race. Turkington, I think, could have quite easily driven off into the distance, like he did earlier on in the year at Brands.
I'd agree.
But he knew the job that he had to carry out, so I think keeping Dobble behind him as well as Ingram for as long as possible was the job that he was set out to do.
But on the flip side, as you just said there, his job was to keep Dobble back at all costs, to keep Ingram back at all costs, which could have led to Ingram, the Dobble and Turkington having a bit of a skirmish, which would put Ingram into second. And I think had he got into second with 5-6 laps to go, he would have probably won the race because he was quicker than Hill by half a second.
Yeah.
If not more.
Yeah, it was...
But it's a really tricky one. It's not a criticism of Ingram because I say it's counterintuitive to say to a racer, hold back and see what happens because you can't put your championship in other people's hands to a degree. And I get that. But and Dobble raced really well, I thought. Held his own at the front. Yeah. Did really well. And another driver I'm going to mention briefly because we didn't really see anything in the background. Understandably so. Yeah. We've moaned about ITV cameras all year, but obviously they had to focus on the front. Fair enough. DeLyon was excellent this race. He did a really nice move when Ingram was trying to come through the field. He did a really nice move himself on Camish to get past Moffat. Nicely round the outside, and Ingram was down the inside. It was a nice 3 wide moment out towards the back end of the circuit, and he then was able to pull away. Yes, okay, Moffat went on to retire with a puncture or something, but he was able to keep up with the likes of Camish and Aaron Taylor-Smith, who have shown this season that they're top quality drivers. Absolutely. And then it was all going to be the question to whether Ingram could get past Turkington. And in fair defence or fair comment to Turkington, he didn't have to defend well. Knew exactly where to put the car, kept it clean at all times. Ingram bumped him, he nudged him, he tried every trick in the book. But Colin,
the dark arts.
Yeah, but Colin, in his in fairness to him, really just knew where to plant the car. He even saw it coming off Graham Hill Bend, straight away moving across to block the inside for the next bit. Yeah. He knew what he was doing and he defended it really, really well.
It's part of the reason that he's a 4-time champion is because he's been able to defend those moments when they become crucial and critical. He's just on this situation doing it on behalf of Hill to play that team game.
What I will say though is that while Hill has now got a 5-point lead at the top of the championship at the end of race 1, I still think and this will come back to haunt me at the end of the podcast, I still think the advantages of Ingram. I think the car is quicker. I think he's happier in the car. Okay, that win will have settled some nerves in the Hill camp. But equally, it ranks the pressure because now he's to lose as well. So
there's more race pace coming out of Ingram than there is Hill so far from what we've seen. Obviously, Ingram's going to have more hybrid.
Yeah.
As long as there's no penalties due to the start line issue.
They'll both be on mediums.
They will both be on mediums.
Which takes the BMW a couple more laps to get the mediums up to speed.
The BMWs have got to try and scamper away in those first couple of laps.
But the difficulty is going to be, you expect them both to have good starts off the line. So what do you do if they're alongside each other? How do you manage that? Because they're both going to have good starts.
Ingram has got to put himself in and amongst those two within that first lap.
Yeah.
We've seen it throughout the whole season. You've got to attack the BMWs early. Sutton's done it and Ingram's done it to great effect. And he knows he's got to effectively win this race. If not, Hill's going to go out and win it because Turkington will just play the rear gunner.
Yeah, because, as I say, going into turn one, both will get good starts, you'd imagine. So Turkington won't necessarily be able to come across the inside. No. So they might have to go Hill and Turkington side by side around Paddock Hill Bend.
Yeah.
Which would be interesting. The final race order then, subject to any post-race penalties. And personally as well, I hope there isn't any penalties. I don't want this championship decided in the bus, unless it's something so egregious. But certainly on the replay, I didn't see Ingram get any advantage.
No,
we'll see what happens there. Hill from Turkington from Ingram was your podium places. Dobble fourth, Camish fifth, Aaron Taylor Smith, De Lyon, Rowbottom, Chilton and Watson rounding out the top 10. Zelos, Osborne, I can't remember him writing, Halstead, and then Sumpton. Who could that be?
Smiley, thank you. Smiley Halstead.
Yeah, Smiley Halstead, Sumpton. Thank you very much. So you have gained a point on me in the predictions at the moment. Two actually, because you went for a Hill race win.
Oh yes.
And I didn't.
Hill race win, and obviously
double
two Toyotas retiring, although there were three. It's still.
Yeah, I could be really awkward about it, but I'm not going to be. So you have pulled out. I think with 2 races to go, I really don't see how I can.
Yeah, you'd need to have a miracle on the points tally and stuff.
Although I have had at least one retirement in each race so far come in, and I would have thought Aaron Taylor Smith will finish seventh in the championship, given what's happened behind him. So it's you're ahead by a half a point effectively at this stage, but I need to close the gap. So we'll see what happens in the next 2 races.
Yeah, we'll get on to race 2 next. Getting into race 2 then, and Morgan was the only driver of those from race 1, which would not be on the grid for race 2. Looked like there was too much damage. He had front end and rear end impacts, so I think it was just a stretch too far for WXR to get him out. Plus, he's not really fighting for anything, is he?
Manufacturer points.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, absolutely. I imagine they probably elected Turkington and Hill anyway going into the weekend.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned Turkington and Hill, and they had a typical BMW start, getting off that front row with ease.
Well, it should be pointed out, really, that it was a misty, kind of drizzly but not wet condition for the race.
Didn't see many wipers throughout the race.
No, it's one of those where you step out on a sort of early morning, you get sort of that wetness in the air, but it's not. You don't come in wet. It just all feels a bit cold and miserable. But that was going to be key because obviously the BMWs have to get their tyres warmed up in the. It takes them longer than the front wheel drive cars to do so.
Yeah, and Ingram was one that knows that extremely well, so he was going to be on the attack from the start, which he was. Coming down into Graham Hill Bend, he was already right back on the tail of Turkington and well on the attack going out towards the back of the circuit, where he made probably the move of the weekend so far.
Well, so far.
So far.
Because the next one's about to come, but yeah, go on
then. Round the outside, down at Hawthorns, where Camish had that famous incident with the brakes failing. He went all the way round the outside, and to be fair to Turkington, gave him room.
I was about to say, that is a really fast corner.
It is.
The back of Brands Hatch, it may look slower because there's a little bit more braking than the infield circuit, but it's quick. It's really quick out section of the track. And if Colin, Tom alluded to it in his interview after the race, that you have to trust the people you're racing with to do moves like that. And as you say, fair play to Colin because he gave enough racing room. He didn't move across. He knew. He decided to stick his ground. And once the place was lost, no silly business. And you've got to say fair play because that could have been quite a big accident if he hadn't had that racing respect.
Yeah. Meanwhile, coming from the back of the pack, obviously Sutton, Cook, Moffat, all those drivers were going to look to be fighting through. And actually, by the end of lap 1, Sutton had already made 6 places.
All those drivers would fight their way through, apart from Huff, who for reasons best known to the 2012 World Touring Car Champion, hasn't had a very good weekend, as we'll get to.
Really struggling. And then comes Ingram's...
I think this is a better move.
Do you?
I think this is a better move. Yeah.
Okay. Late break move into paddock. We've seen this customary move from Ingram before, even earlier this season on the Indy circuit. And it's a brilliant pass. It's a late dive to the inside, all done on the brakes. And then
Hill brakes early. You can see it on the replay. He feathers the brake quite early and then goes into the big breakers, at which point, Ingram pulls out and goes to the inside.
And Ingram does this in a way where he holds it on the apex as well. You could see Hill trying to cut back underneath him, but Ingram even tapped the brakes a little bit more just to make sure he wasn't going to get any chance of coming back up the inside. And from there onwards, it was fairly comfortable from Ingram, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a better move because I think you can trust Collins slightly more than you can Hill in terms of...
agreed.
Particularly because Collins not going for a championship, whereas Hill is, and you don't know, emotion could be a funny thing. And B, because how late it is.
Yeah.
It caught me by surprise. It certainly caught Hill by surprise, and it definitely caught me by surprise on the sofa because he looked so far back going into the corner. You could, on the commentary, and you could see it on the screen, he was certainly closing down the pit straight, but he looked too far back. But okay, we'll see what we can do around Druids and out the back. But then, boom, he's gone down the inside, and if he's a millimetre out, they're both off.
Yeah.
It's that simple, and I think that's why it's the better of the two moves, albeit both are top quality moves.
Yeah, and Hill gives him just enough room to make the pass safely, but not without sort of like pressure.
Yeah, it doesn't move across, which is good.
Yeah. Dobble was having trouble early on. He was dropping back. Looks like he had an issue. He went into the pits, did get back out, but it looks like he wouldn't go on to be classified at the end of the race. We're not sure what that is at the moment. Obviously, we're recording directly after each race, so we may well find out at the end of the day. But by the end of lap 3, Sutton was, 5th on mediums. Now, we both thought he was starting on softs.
Yeah.
With the speed that he came through the pack.
Bearing in mind, he was up to 9th on the lap by the end of lap 1, and obviously lap 1 there is no hybrid. You can get hybrid from lap 2, but obviously he had the full allocation being at the back of the grid. Yeah. But he can't have used that on lap 1. So the speed and he is just an insane driver. It's unbelievable how quick he is.
It really was. Gloves off for Sutton now and see what you can get from it, basically. And he was making very good progress, as were Moffat and Cook, to be fair to them. Moffat struggled for pace throughout most of the season, I'd say.
I'd agree.
But this has looked his most comfortable round, should I say.
Yeah, I'd agree. But then it's come potentially 10 races too late.
Yes.
Or 10 rounds too late.
10 rounds too late. And then it all kind of settled down at the front, didn't it?
I mean, Ingram had checked out and he was gone.
There were gaps forming between Ingram and Hill and Turkington. Turkington was never going to be really attacking Hill.
No, but as Turkington said in his race interview afterwards, he found it quite difficult because he's clearly quicker than Hill this weekend. There's no doubt about that. And obviously he had to hold station in third, whereas actually, again, you can't risk it for BMW, but would they have been better to let Turkington go for a couple of laps, see if he could catch Ingram and do anything about it,
and then give it back?
But again, it's so difficult because then if Hill falls back into Camish, it's really difficult to balance up. I say I'm quite an attacking, aggressive kind of person when it comes to this sort of thing. I would have potentially been tempted to say, right, we're going to swap for 5 laps.
Yeah.
If Camish starts to get close to you, we'll swap back sooner. But
see, that makes it tricky if the driver gets that close.
I know it makes it tricky, but I think that Hill clearly was never going to challenge Ingram once he'd gone, whereas Turkington's clearly quicker this weekend.
Yep.
And that's going to be so crucial in race 3 because obviously Hill will be starting behind Turkington.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to swap round at some point.
Yeah.
And it's going to be tricky where they are in the pack, as we'll get to in a moment.
It is, but there was a really good battle in the midfield from sort of like 7th downwards. Taylor Smith was running his own race in 6th in absolutely no man's land until it came fairly close to the end. But all the midfield drivers, pretty much 7th down to 17th, I think, were all running together, all challenging each other, making dives for moves. But I must say, they were all clean.
Yeah, I was amazed we didn't end up in a safety car situation because there's one point we had the 2 Toyotas and the 2 Bristol Street Motors running 4 abreast at times. And there's also a bit where was it Cook was in the middle of a sandwich of Moffat on one side, Chilton on the other, and you think,
Yeah.
oh gosh, a sandwich of Cook, Moffat, and Chilton. This can't end well, but it did, and you say they did keep it very clean. I'm very fascinated to see what's going to happen in race 3 because that tends to be a schools out kind of race, and this has been quite
especially the last one of the season.
Well, that's what I mean, and it's quite a bolshy round or weekend already so far. Has there been quite a few little bits and pieces? So that's going to be interesting to see how people behave in race 3.
Yeah, so Zelos was probably the main loser in that battle pack. He had a moment on his own going into paddock on lap 11. Got a little bit out of shape and then had to run through the gravel, which dropped him back down. And then Sutton was starting to close in on Camish, wasn't he?
Yeah, we were treated to an absolute masterclass in how to race hard, fast and fair between these two because they battled each other side by side for a good couple of laps. And again, through the really fast parts of the circuit. Changing places, Sutton got in front, then Camish got back in front. It was nip and tuck. Camish came out the victor, which I think he'll probably take as a big moral victory for himself. But yeah, it was just a really good masterclass in how good, hard, clean, fair racing can be.
Yeah, and then Robo in that same garage had a puncher late on lap 13 going into Paddock Hill Bend, which was it's a scary place to have a puncher go, isn't it?
It's not his weekend and it's not his year. It's not been a good season at all for Rowbottom. He's probably at an all-time low in the championship, really, for where he'd expect to be, to where, obviously his first season potentially in the Cataclysm Mercedes was more difficult in some ways, but the expectation the team he's at, it's just not been a good season for him.
Especially following his performances from last year where he took a win and stuff, he took pole positions.
Well, even in his second season at Dynamics, he was certainly improving, and I remember the race at Alton Park we went to where I thought he was magnificent that day. This season just hasn't gone his way at all, and I don't think a lot of it's down to his fault either. I mean, he has at times made mistakes, obviously, but I think the car has been so unreliable in his hands this year. And is that the way he's driving? Is that the way they're setting it up? Is there somewhere in the middle?
Or is it just the fact that car is not as quick this season?
Yeah, quite possibly. And maybe we're seeing the stresses of running a 4-car team a little bit. Yeah, last year when you're winning, it's easy. And as without trying to do down the achievements that happened last year, but once you're winning, effing is easier. And once you're not winning, everything becomes 10 times harder. You can see it across all sports, is that once you're winning, you want to keep it going, of course you do, but winning becomes a habit and it becomes easy and a joy to go to each weekend. When it's not quite going well, it's a completely different experience.
And effectively going into this final race that we've got left today, they're only really in with a chance of 1, possibly 2 championships. And that's the manufacturers and the teams, which at the beginning of the season you'd have probably had them nailed on considering what came last season.
We'll find out on the open hour.
We will. But yeah, the race didn't have too much action, and I think that's because everything was sorted out fairly early on, and they went on to finish in the following order. So Ingram from Hill, from Turkington, from Camish, from Sutton. As I say, Aaron Taylor-Smith had a very lonely race until late on, finishing 6th. From Cook, Moffat, Chilton, Osborne. Watson made up a few positions towards the end. In 11th, from Smiley, De Leon, Zelos and Sumpton, who got a point, yes. So that leaves a 1-point gap at the top of the championship going into the final race, and Mr. Alan Gow picked out ball 7 to put Josh Cook onto pole.
No controversy this week,
although he did pick it up and shake it about and...
Yeah. The draw needs to be changed for next year, one way or the other, and we need to either change the format of how they're drawn out the bowl, and we have to make sure that there's no race winner doing it. And actually, to be fair, part of me thinks, I don't think there's any. I want to make it clear there was no controversy with this either. But do you want the race? The person in charge of the championship pulling it out? I probably don't want that either. I think that's still too close. I'd much prefer you have a driver in a lower series, particularly next year we've got the kids series coming through, or you have a random fan off the
fan winner.
Yeah, exactly.
Competition winner to put it out would be quite cool.
Yeah, and as I say, I want to make it abundantly clear, I'm not suggesting any controversy in this draw whatsoever. I just think that if you have anybody associated with the championship, you just leave yourself open to questions, don't you? Because you've only got to dive into the Facebook comment sections today on the BTC post to see some of the views that are out there. Social media is a very dangerous thing.
Yes. we shall get into the final race now, where everything will be decided.
Before we do, Cook or no, not Cook.
Cook. I'll go for a Cook win.
Go for Cook win. Ingram or Hill?
I just think with the pace that he's shown this weekend, it has to be Ingram.
I agree. Let's find out. So race 3 then, and a winner takes all scenario. And going into the race, the rain had fallen. It was a greasy, spitting kind of track. It was cold and everybody was on wets. And actually going into it, we thought that this would maybe be Tom Ingram territory, however. But actually, it's probably the conditions that the Hyundai's been the worst in this year, which is that greasy race 2 at Silverstone style, where actually Hill has come out on top on these conditions throughout the season. And as we'll get into it,
and these are conditions that we knew Sutton was going to relish. And
we'd already decided he'd won, hadn't we? Let's be honest.
It was one to watch out for.
Yeah, I mean, away from the start, it was actually Ingram got the better start of Hill, was able to get ahead of Hill. Cook led coming out of Druids. A few cars were going, down Paddock Hill, a few cars going sideways. Thought, this could be interesting. Yep. Everyone sorted themselves out, and actually Ingram had got ahead of Hill and was looking pretty good. He looked quick, and you thought, hang on, they've turned this on.
They were about 3 wide in front of him, and he had nowhere to go, however.
No, exactly. He got boxed in a little bit by the crowd ahead of him. But I say it looked as if in the early couple of laps that they got the tuning just perfect out of the Hyundai. I say it was a race where nothing really happened. Both Hill and Ingram were trying to make progress without causing any damage to their races, so it was very tentative.
Yep.
Ingram also almost got run off track by Camish. Part of it was Camish being a little bit zesty. The other part was Ingram not fully committing to either way. I think that, as I say, they were trying to dance around a little bit and not get caught in any issue.
Yeah, they had 2 sort of like runs to the grid because of the change of conditions. And Ingram actually had a little off on that run to the grid, which probably put the scare amongst his thoughts. And then Camish was very close to running into him on a greasy line, the line you kind of take when you're in wet conditions. Everyone was exploring how much grip there was in those early laps.
You mentioned Camish there. His start was under investigation. We've got no idea what happened because we were recording straight away afterwards. And
seen the replay and can't tell if there is anything.
Looks fine, and I imagine the stewards' bus is now closed anyway, so we probably won't hear any more on that.
As soon as that checker flag dropped, they're on their way home.
And as I say, then the BMW started to get a little bit better in the conditions. Ingram was really struggling to get past Aaron Taylor-Smith.
Yeah.
And then coming together with Aaron Taylor-Smith, Josh Cook and Ash Sutton coming out of Graham Hill, gave Jake Hill the chance to dive up the inside of all of them and get into 3rd place. And that, as soon as he'd done that, it was pretty much game over. I mean, he'd already made a really good pass on Ingram a lap before, where he had hung on the inside, and I wouldn't say he wanted it more, but he just wouldn't yield the place. He really hung in there.
It felt like he had a lot more confidence in his car in this race compared to what Ingram did.
Yes.
And he was able to trust it more, able to turn in, able to get that power down a little bit sooner. Which we were slightly worried about with his interview on the grid. He seemed a little bit tentative, and going into this absolutely pivotal race of his season, anything could have happened.
But you've got to give him credit. It was a really good move on the outside of Tom Ingram, as I say, on the wet, slippery line, and he held his nerves well to complete that move. Sutton would then get into the lead, passing Josh Cook. As I say, that would then cause the concertina with Aaron Taylor-Smith, which allowed Jake Hill to get up into 3rd position. And then Ingram was sort of had to force his issue past Aaron Taylor-Smith a couple of laps there, but it took him a good 2-3 laps to do it.
Yeah.
All the while Turkton was nipping at his heels with Camish not far behind. And Ingram just didn't have the pace in the car, did he? I know, obviously, Taylor-Smith had the hybrid, so he was able to hold off Ingram with a couple of tactical uses of the hybrid, but just didn't have the outright pace, did he?
Certainly compared to race 1 and race 2, he was able to place the car exactly where he wanted it, put the power down as soon as he wanted to, and get that drive out the corner, get that undercut where he needed to. But this race, he just wasn't able to position the car, and he said at the end of it, he had no front end, which was obvious.
It was absolutely obvious. Hill would then get into second position because Josh Cook slid wide at the end of Graham Hill Bend.
Yep.
One of those moves where Hill had been catching Cook and had made a couple of little nibbles, which I thought, this is interesting, because there was a moment he nibbled and slid and you thought, oh my lord, he's going round.
There were a couple of times that they were going side by side down the back straight into Hawthorn, and you thought, you need to yield here, otherwise it's going to end in disaster.
Yeah.
Which he did, and obviously, you mentioned Cook made that slight mistake and it put him through.
Oh yeah, there was 2 good opportunities to pass up from that moment, and then to be honest, as soon as he got into second, it was day done. Ingram was not catching him up, and
Sutton had already disappeared off into the distance at this point. Had a good commanding lead, 3 or 4 seconds, and then Hill was just there sitting comfortably, wasn't he?
Yeah, and to be honest, without trying to rush through this race 3 review, the race kind of petered out from there. I mean, nothing else really happened apart from Ingram carried on to go backwards. I mean,
yeah, he really struggled as the further it got into the race. It felt like he'd almost put too much front end on the car, and he just used the tyres.
Yeah, I don't know if by that point part of him had given up as well. I mean, because at that point, what he needed to do was just to finish in the points and hope Hill didn't finish.
Yes.
And it didn't matter where he finished in the points because he wasn't catching Hill.
No.
I do wonder if part of it was, this is done. What's the there's no point fighting these cars.
You've got to
now,
hope for outside assistance or a breakdown or
a
brake failure or something.
And it nearly came. Hill through Hawthorn, slid very, very wide. Managed to keep it just about on the grey stuff. Obviously, he said in his post-match interview that he feared he might have had a puncture. Obviously, he didn't. But I think overall, Hill did what he needed to do in this race. He got the conditions, the car set up perfect for the conditions. Tom Ingram didn't. And actually, Hill's driven in these conditions well all year. And actually, he's driven in all conditions well all year. And whilst we look a bit silly because we had said coming into the weekend, we both backed Ingram coming into the weekend. Although I did say it was a coin toss. Hill has kept his head very well this weekend, and he's driven all 3 races perfectly. He's had a lot of help from Colin, but you'd expect that. And actually, I think this shows where, I wouldn't say Tom's been let down necessarily, but he has had to do this on his own. He's had no support, and that's not to take anything away from Hill or to devalue his championship, but this is the power of teamwork in the sport. And you look back to race 1 and you think, had Ingram got to second in race 1, how much would that have changed the championship? But he didn't, and because Turkington held him back. And then in race 2, and actually all through the weekend, Colin has stuck on the back of Hill and just made it so he's always got that little bit of comfort behind him that he knows he's protected.
Yeah, and even in this final race where Turkington did fall back behind Ingram at one point, he was there giving him something to think about. Yes, okay, Hill was just a position ahead. He knew he needed to probably keep on the back of him to possibly change later in the race, but he then also had to think about the possibility of Turkington being there and him picking up on any small mistake that Ingram may have made. In the end, it didn't come to that because of Ingram's outright pace in the car in that final race. But Turkington did exactly what a teammate needs to do in that sort of situation this weekend. Yeah,
and crucially, you think that when Hiller got through and was going off down the road in third and then ultimately second, it was Turkington putting the pressure on Tom while he was stuck behind Aaron Taylor-Smith, saying, "You've got to, I'm here, mate. I'm going to keep nibbling away at you, and I'm going to keep slowing you down while you defend while Jake escapes." So, I think WSR, I think Jake will need to buy Colin a massive drink, whatever his tipple is. Let's say that's not to say they've only won it because of Colin. I'm just saying that is where teamwork really comes into it this year. And I would say that that's something that Sutton hasn't had from Camish because they've been in a title fight together, and Camish was less happy to yield potentially as soon as Colin was. And at Bristol Street Motors, and we've said it before, I think we said at the start of the season, and certainly said it during the season.
There isn't
it's Tom. Tom, and he's on his own, and that is a problem.
There isn't a driver there that has enough quality and consistency to help challenge for a title
or keep taking points off those in the title battle, which is the key thing, isn't it? Because you look at the amount of points Colin has taken off people today in that title fight. And that's absolutely key. So that'll be a bit of a head scratch for Bristol Street in the summer. I think they'll need to, over the winter break, they'll need to be looking at cars in greasier conditions, and they'll need to be looking at sort of championship management, shall we say. But the final result then was Sutton won the race by a country mile. I mean, it's what he does at Brands Hatch. He always wins a race, doesn't he? But he won it very easily from Jake Hill, from Josh Cook in the podium places. Camish, who's had a really strong year, and he'll be potentially disappointed to finish as low as he has in the championship because he has been strong this year.
The fact is, Camish has finished pretty much every race he's had. I think one non-classified I mentioned, or one non-point score. And he has had that consistency that he hasn't had in the previous 2 seasons, where he's had that run of either a couple of bad weekends or something like that. He needs to now build on this going forward into next year.
Assuming they keep the same car, which I don't think they do, but that'll all be commented at the point.
Rumours are already starting, and we've only just finished the season.
Turkington 5th, then Tom Ingram, Sam Osborne, a good result for him.
Very.
Watson, Moffat, and Morgan, and then rounding out your top 10 with Dobble, Aaron Taylor-Smith, Zelos, Chilton, and Rowbottom in the final points-paying positions, which means the final standings at the top of the championship for the 2024 season. Jake Hill on 421, Tom Ingram 413, Sutton back on 365, Turkington 346, Camish 346, Turkington finishes ahead on races 1, and Josh Cook on 327. And what I will say as well, it was great to see the amount of sportsmanship in the paddock afterwards. You saw every driver going up to the team, to WSR and to Laser Tools, embracing Simon Hill, Jake's father, and Mark Blundell. You saw shots of Pete Osborne congratulating Simon in the pit lane as well. So look, really, really good to see that there is a lot of sportsmanship and camaraderie in the paddock.
Yeah, we know that we get that on the whole throughout a season, but seeing it all come to the peak, the end of this year, and see everyone can see and they can understand how much work and effort has gone in for what Hill has achieved, and also WSR and MB Motorsport.
Absolutely. In terms of the other championships, then, as we said coming into this, we already knew that Aaron Taylor-Smith had won the Independents. We already knew that PMR had won the Independent Teams, and that Mikey Doble had won the Jack Sears.
And crucially, Turkington took home the Wingfoot Award on Saturday.
Indeed. Yes, as we discussed in the quality section. In terms of manufacturers, BMW ended up winning that 818 points to 795 Napa, or Alliance Racing Ford as it is. And in the teams, Napa did hold on to the teams championship. They won that by 724 to Bristol Street Motors back on 609. It's been a bit of an interesting year for Napa. Well, obviously, we will do a full season review in due course once the dust has settled on this. Without making this podcast go on any longer, we will go to our driver awards and the final prediction standings before we close off the day. Your driver of the day.
I mean, our driver of the day. It has to be Hill for how he's raced today, first of all, because he's done exactly what he needed to today. And when it came down to that crucial point in race 3, he made the move, he had the right car under him, and he's got the best possible results that he could have done today.
A first, a second, and a second. That's not a bad weekend, is it?
It's
and
not,
it's a weekend worthy of winning any championship. And you look at how many wins he's taken this year in podiums. Yeah, he's absolutely the deserving winner for 2024.
Yeah, definitely.
We've got the same villain as well.
Same villain, yeah.
It's tough.
It was an abomination of a weekend for him, wasn't it?
Just nowhere a weekend.
Absolutely awful. He was complaining in qualifying.
He was agitated this weekend, wasn't he?
Yeah, and obviously got caught up in that incident in race 1, was nowhere in race 2. Race 3 comes into the pits 6 laps from the end. Just a really poor finish to the season that at points looked like it had shoots of positivity.
A bit of changes now, which you'll be pleased to hear for a bit of discussion. My surprise goods weekend, Osborne. He's won the Jack Sears this weekend. 3 top 10 finishes, I think it was overall, was it? It was certainly top 10 in 2 of them. No.
Not quite.
Not quite, but he's 3 points finishes, which is really good. And he's obviously won 2 Jack Sears trophies or races this weekend as well. Yeah, and he's had a pretty strong end to the season, dare I say. I think he's been quite good at Silverstone. He was also quite good the track before at Donington. So
he always seems to do quite well at Brands.
Yeah.
We've seen it before, but I think, again, he just needs to kick on a little bit. We've said this a couple of times about him. If he can show this sort of consistency throughout a whole season, then he can be a really good, consistent midfield driver.
I agree, though this weekend again he has, I believe, outscored Rowbottom.
Yeah, but that kind of sums up Rowbottom's season, doesn't it?
Yeah, the fact that he's had a bad weekend isn't even a surprise bad anymore. No. But there we go. Your surprise good?
My surprise good is actually Watson.
Okay.
With the lack of pace and the poor season that Watson has had, I was quite surprised to see how well he finished the year. I was kind of expecting him to be down battling right at the bottom end of the points. But he had a good showing this weekend, and And yeah, I just wanted to go something a little bit different because I do think Osborne's had a really good weekend.
Yeah, I'm surprised bad for me. I've gone Bristol Street Motors. No, but they'll just nowhere this week. Well, they'll just nowhere this weekend. Well, Ingram obviously aside, but Ingram is very quick at whatever you put him in.
Yep.
Chilton has had a very nothing weekend. Zelos has been disappointing, dare I say, after 2 really good showings in his previous ones.
Yeah.
And House said he's made a lot of noise on social media about having Jason Plato here this weekend. Again, nowhere. Okay, you got points in race 1, but I mean half the field was taken out. So and okay, yes, you've avoided that and you've driven your race and fair play. But yeah, I just think that on the weekend where they all needed to show up a little bit, they haven't. Ingram aside, I think as we said in the race review there, Tom needed someone this weekend, and nobody answered the call. And you've got to say, back at Silverstone, Zelos did answer that call and was in amongst it and fighting and in the points, and had a little go of Jake Hill at one point. This weekend, nobody answered the call. And I think that has, not helped Tom Ingram in his championship fight this weekend.
Yeah, mine is actually going to be Rowbottom, because I
surprise anymore.
Well, it's Napa's home circuit. I thought, okay, they're going to try and go out with a bit of a bang, which Sutton has. I think Camish raced well all weekend.
Robert had a bang in race 1, it caused some damage.
Yeah, which it's the story of his season, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Full of non-finishes, low point scores, and retirements.
Well, that is the end of another season, Sam.
Predictions.
Oh, predictions. Oh.
Come on, predictions.
Yeah, I thought we got to the end of the season.
No.
Okay, so predictions then. Oh. Well, you can probably tell by his jovial behaviour who's won the predictions.
So before we get into it, if you haven't seen the preview, go and watch that now. There's a little bit in there. Obviously, you'll see our predictions, and it was a bumper package of predictions for this weekend to give you some sort of chance to try and scrape it all back, because you had quite a deficit going into this weekend.
Thing is, I
think it was 7 point.
But I had a good weekend.
You did.
You did enough.
I did.
So neither of us got pole. I went for Ingram, you went for Sutton. Obviously, it was Colin Turkington.
Yep.
In terms of race winners, you took 2 points here. You had a Sutton and a Hill.
Yep.
The other one was Cook. I had Ingram, Camish, and Cook. So obviously 1 point for me. In terms of the general predictions, Jack Sears next. Sorry, I had Osborne to the Jack Sears this weekend. You went for Dan Zelos.
Yeah.
I was right with Osborne.
Disappointed in Zelos this weekend.
Yep. In terms of the general 3, I got 2 right. So I had each race to have a retirement or non-classified, and that was across all 3. I had Aaron Taylor-Smith to outscore Huff, which I think you could just take any of one of the races and he did it.
Yeah.
I also had the winning margin for the points to be 5 points or less, which for a long period looked like it might be correct.
Until Ingram lacked that pace in the final race.
Yeah.
A couple of crucial overtakes put that to bed.
So I only had 2 there. You only got 1, so you had a double Toyota retirement, which you had in race 1.
Yep.
You had Smiley to be the best Cooper, which was not the case this weekend.
No, Leon has pleasantly surprised me and was nice and quick this weekend.
And you had Hill or Ingram to miss out on the top 6. Both got through to the top 6. That was in the qualifying, of course. We then did our final championship standings and point scores. So I went for Ingram, Hill, Sutton, Cook, Turkington, and Camish. So I only got 1 point there, which was Sutton in third. You got 2 points because you had Ingram, Hill, Sutton, Cook, Camish, and Turkington. So points of Sutton and Camish.
Yep.
In terms of points, none of us got dead on prediction for the points. But
can I just say, I think pretty much all the drivers in the championship hunting, inverted quotation marks, all scored a lot more points this weekend than I was expecting.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah.
So I got 4 points in this one. I got 410 for Ingram, 407 for Hill, 370 for Sutton, and 335 for Cook, which were the closest to their overall points. You got 2. You had Camish on 339 and Turkington on 332, so they were closest to that.
Yep.
Which means this weekend I won by 9 points to 7. So I won the weekend.
You did.
I won the weekend. That's a little bit of solace, but you did win by 42 points to 37. We will, of course, have our award ceremony later on towards the end of the year.
Yep.
If you want any particular awards or categories in that show, please comment, drop us a message or anything along those lines. That is that for 2024. We have a new champion.
Yeah.
We have a deserved new champion.
Yeah, definitely.
It's been a superb year of racing. We've seen some excellent racing by particularly the top 3, but all through the grid. I think coming into the season, you and I both had some concerns about the smaller grid, whether hybrid is going to work, all this kind of stuff. But actually, this has been one of the better contested seasons I remember in recent times.
I think there are some amendments that can be made to make it even better on top.
Which we'll discuss in the off-season.
But there are plenty of positives, especially how hybrid has turned around your complete outlook on it even. We have, as you say, a deserving champion. He has won an incredible amount of races this season, been very consistent and is there when it matters.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've enjoyed this season.
I've enjoyed it too.
We were very nervous going into the final race because no one knew what was going to happen, and I think that is the best way to end it off.
Absolutely. The only thing that's sad about it is that is another season done. We've now got no racing until they come back in sort of Easter time next year. So all that's left for me to say is thank you to every single one of you that has listened throughout the season, dropped us a like, interacted on a post. It honestly means the world. I think we might have even ticked over to the TikTok number this afternoon, possibly. I'm just going to check it now. We have.
Hey!
We've hit the 1,000 on TikTok this afternoon as well. So we obviously launched TikTok at the start of this season, and to be at that mark by the end of it is absolutely stunning. So thank you to anyone that has interacted with us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts,
Facebook,
Instagram, TikTok, anywhere like that. Anyone that's come up to us at a race circuit and said hello, honestly, your continued support blows us away. So.
And if you haven't already, go and subscribe, go and get the bell on, go and find all our social media platforms. And if you've got friends out there that might be interested in listening to us, sometimes we could be funny, sometimes we could be a bit rubbish. But that's the thrill of it, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go and share it with them and get them to listen as well.
We hope you've enjoyed the season just half as much as we have. It's been an absolute blast doing this podcast once again. We will be back during the off-season. We're not going to be going away for months on end. We will have content a couple of weeks so that the dust settles. But keep an eye on the socials because we will be back in the off-season. But until then, thank you ever so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.